The lights inside the Tactical Operations Center flickered against the pre-dawn darkness, casting restless shadows across wall-mounted maps and radio equipment that hummed with static tension. Rain hammered the canvas roof in sheets, each gust of wind making the whole structure shudder. The air tasted of sweat, coffee gone cold, and the particular metallic edge that comes when men know something is about to go wrong. Near the entrance, almost invisible against the muddy tarpaulin wall, stood a woman most of them barely registered. Calloway Reeves held a stained rucksack against her leg shoulders, relaxed in that particular way that speaks of long experience carrying heavy things. She was 34, slight in build, with auburn hair, pulled back in a simple tie that hadn't seen a mirror in days. Her face carried no makeup, no effort at presentation, just the weathered calm of someone who'd learned to be comfortable in uncomfortable places. She didn't look like much to them. Too small for this world of body armor and rifle plates. Too quiet for the constant radio chatter and shouted commands. Too still among all these men who couldn't stop moving, pacing, fidgeting with equipment they'd already checked 3 times. A civilian contractor in cargo pants, in a faded jacket, probably some analyst who'd gotten lost on the way to the admin tent. 2 young Marines near the coffee station nudged each other, one barely suppressing a grin. The taller one whispered something about contractors always showing up where they didn't belong, getting in the way of real work. His buddy snorted agreement loud enough that several others glanced over. A ranger leaning against the comm table shook his head slowly, the kind of dismissive gesture that said everything about what he thought of civilians in combat zones. Calloway didn't react. Her eyes stayed on the tree line visible through the tent flap, tracking something none of them seemed to notice. The way the leaves moved. The direction of that movement. Small details that told stories if you knew how to read them. Her thumb traced the strap of her pack in a steady rhythm, unconscious the callus there speaking to years of carrying weight in exactly that position. Captain Hollis Vance stood at the map table, 49 years old, and carrying authority like a shield. His voice cut through the morning briefing with the particular certainty of someone who needed control to feel comfortable. He was explaining the day's patrol routes, his finger tracing lines on the laminated map, when Calloway shifted slightly closer to see the terrain overlay. Vance's eyes found her immediately, and his jaw tightened. He didn't stop talking, but his tone shifted harder now, making sure everyone understood the hierarchy here. When she opened her mouth as if to speak, he cut her off before a sound emerged. Miss Reeves, if you have questions about the intelligence summary, you can read it in the report I'll file later. We don't need civilian input on tactical operations. A few men chuckled. Calloway's expression didn't change. She just nodded once, a tiny movement, and stepped back into her corner. But her eyes stayed on that map, on the valley they'd marked for today's patrol, on the terrain features that made her jaw tighten just slightly, because she could see what they couldn't, or wouldn't. The valley was a textbook kill zone, overlapping fields of fire, dead space eliminated, perfect enfilade positions on 3 sides. The kind of terrain that turned tactical manuals into autopsy reports. She tried to mention it once quietly to a logistics officer yesterday. Used the proper terminology. Interlocking fields of fire, reverse slope defense positions, military doctrines she knew as well as her own heartbeat. The officer had smiled at her patronizingly and explained that they had actual operators for tactical assessments, but thanks anyway. Now she stood there watching them finalize a mission that felt wrong in every way that mattered, and kept her mouth shut. Because nobody wanted to hear from the quiet contractor in the corner. The woman who probably couldn't even handle a rifle without crying. Outside, the storm system squatted over the base like something living. Weather reports kept scrolling across screens, each update worse than the last. Ceiling dropping, visibility near zero. All aircraft grounded until further notice. The quick reaction force sat at another base 40 minutes away by road, and the roads were washing out faster than anyone wanted to admit. They were isolated, committed, and about to send 12 men into terrain that made Calloway's hands want to shake. Chief Grady Thornton moved through the TOC with the confidence of someone who'd survived long enough to know confidence wasn't enough. At 43, he carried 21 years of service in the lines around his eyes and the deliberate economy of his movements. He'd briefed his 12-man SEAL team an hour ago, running through the mission parameters with the kind of detail that kept people alive. High-value reconnaissance. a suspected weapons cache in a valley 15 kilometers out. Simple surveillance, no direct action unless absolutely necessary. In and out before the weather got worse. Except the weather was already worse. And the intelligence package felt too clean, too specific, like someone had wrapped up exactly what they wanted to hear and tied it with a bow. Thornton had mentioned that to Vance carefully, the way you question a superior officer's judgment without actually questioning it. Vance had shut him down with the kind of answer that ended conversations. The mission stood. The timetable was fixed. The decision was made. So Thornton gathered his team, checked their gear one final time, and tried to ignore the feeling in his gut that had kept him alive through Desert Storm and a dozen deployments since. The feeling that said someone wanted them in that valley very badly. Petty Officer Deckard Cole, 28 years old and sharp as broken glass, finished checking his rifle for the fourth time. He was the team's designated marksman, the one they counted on for precision fire when regular suppression wasn't enough. His grandfather had been a Marine sniper at Chosin Reservoir, frozen half to death in Korean winter, making impossible shots that kept his unit alive. Cole carried that legacy like a weight, always trying to measure up to stories told in a voice gone quiet with age. His grandfather's words came back to him now, the old man's hand steady on a coffee cup, despite the tremor everywhere else. Patience beats technology every time, boy. All the fancy gear in the world won't save you if you can't wait for the right moment. Cole shouldered his pack, feeling the familiar weight settle into place. Through the tent entrance, he could see the contractor woman still standing there, still watching the tree line like she could see through the rain and darkness to something beyond. For just a moment, her sleeve had ridden up earlier, and he'd caught a glimpse of something on her forearm. Looked like a tattoo, faded and old, but the style had seemed familiar somehow. Military, maybe. But that didn't make sense for a contractor. He dismissed the thought. They had real work to do. Thornton's voice brought the team together. Final briefing, final checks. Then they'd roll out at 0530, catch the dawn light in the valley, complete their surveillance, and be back before lunch. Simple, clean, by the book. Except Thornton's instincts kept screaming that nothing about this felt simple. Calloway watched them prepare from her position near the entrance. She'd worked with enough operators to recognize competence when she saw it. These men were good, professional, they knew their chums. They drilled together until they moved like one organism, each man anticipating the others. They were good enough that they might survive what was coming. Might. Her hand went to her jacket pocket without thinking, fingers finding the small metal disc there. A challenge coin worn smooth by years of handling. She didn't pull it out. Didn't need to. She knew every detail by touch. The emblem pressed into its surface. The Latin inscription around the edge. Quietus ex umbra. Death from shadow. Project Wraith hadn't officially existed. Didn't exist now. The 12 operators who'd carried these coins had been erased from every database, every record. Some were dead, some were scattered to contractors and private security jobs pretending they'd never been anything special. And some like her had been blamed for failures they didn't cause and disavowed by people who needed someone to throw away. She'd stopped carrying the coin openly 2 years ago, stopped wearing the tattoo with pride, stopped being the person who'd once set a record that was immediately classified. A record that still stood. A record no one was allowed to speak about. Now she was just a contractor, analyzing intelligence, staying out of the way, invisible, exactly where she needed to be. The SEAL team moved out at 0530 as scheduled, disappearing into the rain and darkness like ghosts. Calloway tracked their movement for as long as she could see them, then longer watching the trees for signs of their passage. She saw nothing. Good. They knew their business. She turned back into the TOC where Vance was already coordinating with other patrols, his attention fragmented across a dozen operations. She moved to a cornered terminal, pulled up the terrain analysis she'd been working on, and studied it again. The valley sat 15 kilometers northeast, a natural bowl carved by ancient water flow, surrounded by ridges that offered perfect observation positions. The intelligence report tagged a compound at the valley floor, suspected weapons storage, minimal security. Easy target for surveillance. Too easy. Calloway's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up satellite imagery from different angles, different times of day. She layered them, looking for patterns. There. And there. Signs of fresh earthworks on the ridges. Fighting positions prepared in advance. cleared lanes of fire that wouldn't be visible from the valley floor, but would give perfect overlapping coverage. Someone had prepared that valley to kill people. She pulled up communication intercepts from the last 72 hours, filtered by location and frequency patterns. Most of it was routine chatter, nothing actionable. But buried in the noise, if you knew what to listen for, certain patterns emerged. Coordinated movement, staged equipment, resources moved into position days in advance. Someone was expecting visitors. Calloway composed a brief analysis, 3 paragraphs of careful professional language that spelled out the indicators without making accusations. She routed it to Vance's Q flag priority and sat back. 30 seconds later, her terminal chimed. Message deleted, no action required. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then pulled up the deleted item from the backup cache she wasn't supposed to have access to. Looked at her own words. Looked at the timestamp showing Vance had opened it, read it, and deliberately removed it from the system. Her hands went very still on the keyboard. Through the tent wall, radio chatter provided constant background noise. Routine check-ins from patrols, weather updates, logistics coordination, the normal sounds of a forward operating base conducting business. Then at 0745, a different sound cut through. Ground Team Bravo to T-Oak passing, checkpoint Delta, entering Valley approach, no contact. Thornton's voice, calm, professional, exactly what you'd expect. Calloway's eyes closed for just a moment. They were committed now, in the Valley approach, terrain channeling them forward, no easy way to turn around. She stood, walked to the map table, studied the terrain overlay one more time, measured distances with her eyes, calculated angles, mapped egress routes that wouldn't be there once the shooting started. A young Marine corporal noticed her hovering near the command staff. "Ma'am, do you need something? You're kind of in the operations area." "Just observing," she said quietly. Her voice had that particular quality of someone who spoke rarely enough that each word carried weight. The corporal looked uncertain, glanced at Vance, decided it wasn't worth making an issue of, and returned to his screen. Calloway stayed exactly where she was. At 0812, Thornton's team reached the valley floor and began their surveillance. Radio check-ins came every 10 minutes, precisely timed. Everything nominal, no contact, no indicators of threat. Calloway's hands gripped the edge of the map table hard enough that her knuckles went white, because she could hear what they couldn't. Or maybe she could just hear what too many years in this business had taught her to recognize. The absence of sound that should be there. The wrong kind of quiet. The feeling of a trap about to spring. At 0827, Cole's voice came through sharper than before. "Chief, I'm spotting movement. Multiple positions. This doesn't match our intelligence." Thornton's response came fast. "Type and number." 30-plus fighters, dispersed positions, too organized for random militia. A pause. Then Thornton's voice again, different now. The tone of someone who'd just realized they'd walked into exactly what they feared. "To Ground Team Bravo, we are compromised. Request immediate..." The transmission cut off as automatic weapons fire erupted in the background. Not scattered shots. Coordinated fire from multiple positions. The sound of a well-planned ambush executed with professional precision. The TOC erupted into controlled chaos. Officers converging on the radio table. Vance shouting orders. Someone demanding air support. Someone else pointing out what everyone already knew. All birds were grounded. Weather made it impossible. They had nothing to send. Thornton's voice came back, fighting to stay calm over the sound of sustained fire. "Any station, any asset, this is Ground Team Bravo. We are taking mass casualties and require immediate fire support." Vance's response came without hesitation. "Negative Bravo. Weather prohibits air assets. QRF cannot deploy in current road conditions. Hold your position." "Sir, we have 2 KIA-4 wounded and we're nearly black on ammunition. We cannot hold without support." "You have your orders, Chief. Hold position. Help is coming." But Calloway could hear in Vance's voice what everyone else seemed to miss, the lack of surprise. The way he delivered those orders like he'd prepared them in advance. The tiny crack in his professional mask that showed something underneath. She looked at him. Really looked. Saw the way his hand had moved to his encrypted phone during the first radio call. Saw the brief glance he'd made at that phone's screen before responding to Thornton. Saw the message displayed there for just a moment before he pocketed the device. "Package in position. Execute Phase 2 on schedule. Her breath went very still in her chest. At 08:32, Thornton's voice came through again, and this time the professional control was cracking. They're massing for a final push. We're black on 556. 4 men can't fight. If anyone can hear this, we are out of time. The TOC went silent for a moment. Even through all the controlled chaos, the transmission cut through like a blade. The sound of good men accepting they were about to die. The sound of operators who'd done everything right, followed every order, and were going to pay for someone else's mistakes with their lives. Calloway stepped forward. Her voice barely rose above the radio static. Give me their exact coordinates. Every head in the TOC turned toward her, as if they'd forgotten she was there, as if a ghost had suddenly spoken. Vance's face went hard as stone. No, you are not inserting yourself into this operation. That's an order, Miss Reeves. She met his eyes, held them. Her voice stayed quiet, but something in it made the temperature in the tent seem to drop. Those men are dying because someone wants them to. Vance's hand moved toward his sidearm just slightly. That's conspiracy theory, and you're done here. Someone escort Miss Reeves from the TOC, now. 2 military police corporals started moving toward her. Young men, uncertain, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but following orders. Calloway didn't move, didn't reach for the rucksack she'd set down, didn't shift her stance, just stood there looking at Vance with eyes that had seen things these young MPs couldn't imagine. You sent them into a kill box. You knew what was waiting. The intelligence was too clean, the timing too specific. Someone paid you to put them there. The TOS went absolutely silent. Radio chatter still provided background noise, but every person in that tent had stopped moving. Vance's voice came out cold. You are relieved, Miss Reeves. You're also fired effective immediately. MPs remove her from this facility. Calloway looked at the 2 young corporals approaching. Looked at their faces still smooth with youth, uncertain about what they'd been ordered to do. She spoke directly to them, her voice carrying that strange weight again. Those 12 men are going to die in the next 5 minutes unless someone helps them. Your captain won't send that help, so I'm going to. You can shoot me or you can move. Decide fast because they don't have time for you to think about it. The MPs exchanged glances, looked at Vance, looked at this small, quiet woman who somehow seemed very dangerous in ways they couldn't quite name. They stepped aside. Calloway picked up her rucksack, settled it over one shoulder with the ease of long practice, and walked toward the tent exit. Behind her, Vance was shouting something, but the words seemed to fade into the background noise of radios and rain. She stepped out into the storm. Heavy drops soaked through her jacket immediately. The tree line loomed ahead, dark and forbidding, the kind of jungle that swallowed people whole and never gave them back. She walked toward it without hesitation, without looking back. Behind her in the TOC, chaos erupted. Officers arguing about what just happened. Someone demanding to know who that woman was. Someone else pointing out they had bigger problems. 12 SEALs were dying, and they had no assets to send. On the radio, Thornton's voice came through one more time, barely audible over the gunfire. The sound of a man who'd accepted his fate, but wouldn't stop fighting until the very end. If anyone can hear this, anyone at all, we need help. The transmission dissolved into static and the chatter of automatic weapons. Calloway moved through the jungle like water finding downhill, following paths that weren't quite paths, reading the terrain with an ease that spoke of thousands of hours doing exactly this. The rain helped masking sound, washing away scent, giving her cover in the gray half-light of the storm. She covered 300 meters when she heard voices ahead. Enemy patrol moving through their sector, probably checking on something. She froze mid-step, one foot still raised, and simply stopped being visible. Not hiding exactly, just becoming part of the landscape, another vertical line among vertical lines, another shadow among shadows. 2 fighters passed within 2 meters of her position, carrying AK pattern rifles, wearing mismatched gear, but moving with discipline. Trained, professional, not random militia. They never looked at her, never sensed her presence, just continued their patrol voices, fading into the rain. Calloway waited 30 seconds after they passed, then continued moving. The old skills came back like muscle memory, things her body knew before her mind could think about them. Where to step, how to move through brush without disturbing it, which shadows would hide her, and which were too obvious. She'd learned these skills over years of training and operations that officially never happened. Learned them from an instructor who'd survived his own war and somehow managed to pass that survival instinct forward. Learned them so well that they'd become reflexive automatic the way breathing didn't require thought. 700 meters from the base, she found her position. A slight rise in the terrain naturally concealed by dense foliage with clear sight lines down into the valley below. She dropped to one knee, shrugged off her rucksack, and began unpacking. The rifle came out in pieces wrapped in waterproof material, each component carefully maintained despite years of unofficial use. She assembled it with the kind of efficiency that looked slow but wasted no motion. Receiver, barrel, optics, each piece finding its place like parts of a puzzle she'd solved 1,000 times. The finished weapon was beautiful in the way functional things are beautiful. No decoration, no unnecessary features, just precise engineering focused on a single purpose. Custom Macmillan action, Krieger heavy barrel on Schmidt in Bender optics. Chambered in 338 Lapua Magnum, capable of reaching out past 1,000 meters with surgical precision. No serial numbers, no unit markings, nothing that would tie this rifle to any organization or operation. A ghost weapon for a ghost operator. As she worked, something fell from her jacket pocket, the challenge coin landing in the mud with a soft sound. She picked it up, looked at it for a moment. Project Wraith insignia worn smooth by years of handling. 12 operators had carried these once. Now most of them were dead or scattered, the program shut down, the missions erased. She whispered to the coin voice, barely audible even to herself. Not for glory, not for recognition, for the ones who can't call for help. And then she put it back in her pocket and returned to her work. The hide took shape quickly. Natural materials gathered from the immediate area, arranged to break up her outline, create shadow where none should exist, make her invisible from more than 10 meters away. She'd built 1,000 hides, taught the technique to others, refined it through trial and error that sometimes involved people shooting at the errors. This one came together in 12 minutes. Perfect concealment, perfect stability for shooting, perfect fields of fire covering the valley below. She settled into position, prone elbows braced on solid earth rifle, nestled into her shoulder like it belonged there. 800 meters down range through the rain and morning mist, she could just make out the valley floor. Could see the shapes of men moving, fighting, dying. Could hear their voices on the radio frequency she'd memorized from the TOC. Thornton's voice came through her earpiece, ragged now. They're coming from all sides. We can't hold. Another voice, younger. Chief, I'm out. I'm completely out. Share ammunition. Anyone with full mags, redistribute now. The sound of gunfire intensified. Someone screamed. Someone else shouted for a medic. The professional calm was dissolving into survival instinct the last moments before a defensive position collapsed completely. Calloway's hand moved to her rifle, chambering the first round with a smooth action. 338 Lapua Magnum, 300 grain Sarah Match King. Hand-loaded for consistency, each round inspected personally, the powder charge measured to the 10th of a grain. She'd made these rounds herself. Every single one. Because when your life depends on a bullet going exactly where you point it, exactly when you need it to, you don't trust anyone else to do the work. Through her scope, the valley came into perfect clarity. She could see the SEAL team now pinned in a depression, taking fire from 3 sides. Could see the enemy fighters moving to positions, coordinating their assault, preparing for a final push that would overrun the Americans in minutes. Could see the machine gun position on the ridge suppressing the SEALs, keeping them pinned, while others maneuvered for the kill. She dialed her scope. 823 meters. 12.4 minutes of angle elevation. Wind 3 knots quartering left to right. Humidity 87%. Temperature 84 degrees. All the variables that turn shooting into mathematics, precision into art. Her breathing slowed. 6 breaths per minute. Deep, controlled, oxygenating her blood while keeping her body perfectly still. Her heart rate dropped, trained response, the way her body knew to prepare for the moment that mattered. First target acquired. The machine gunner firing in controlled bursts, his position marked by muzzle flash and the tracers arcing down toward the SEALs. She clicked her radio once. A single burst of static on the SEAL frequency. Thornton's voice came back immediately, confused, desperate. Unknown station, identify yourself. Calloway's voice barely above a whisper. Keep your heads down for the next 8 minutes. Who is this? Who the hell is this? Someone who doesn't miss. She exhaled. Let her breath reach that natural pause between respiration and stillness. Let the crosshairs settle on target rock steady despite the wind and rain. Let her finger take up the slack on the trigger, that 1.5 pounds of pressure that stood between life and death. Then she squeezed. The rifle barked. Recoil pushed into her shoulder, familiar and controlled. She rode it, keeping the scope on target, watching through the gaze as the bullet flew. 1.2 seconds of flight time. 823 meters of travel. The machine gunner jerked his head, snapping back, body collapsing over his weapon. 1. She worked the bolt. Smooth action, brass ejecting, new round chambering. The motion took less than a second muscle memory from 10,000 repetitions. The assistant gunner looked up, confused, reaching for the weapon, trying to figure out what just happened to his partner. Calloway's second shot answered his question. 2. Down in the valley, the SEAL team was processing what they were hearing. The distinctive crack of a precision rifle, different from the chatter of assault weapons. Spaced shots, controlled. Each one followed by an enemy fighter dropping. Cole's voice came over the radio, talking to Thornton. Chief, that's one shooter. Same rhythm, same precision. Who the hell is that? I don't know, but they're saving our lives. Calloway didn't hear them. Her world had narrowed to the scope, the targets, the mathematics of death delivered at distance. She found the squad leader, the one coordinating the assault with hand signals and radio calls. Watched him raise his arm to signal a flanking maneuver. Third shot. He dropped mid-gesture. 3. The enemy force was beginning to realize something was wrong. Men falling with no idea where the fire was coming from. Attacks stalling as leaders died. Confusion spreading through their ranks like poison. Calloway shifted to the next priority target. RPG gunner shouldering his launcher, aiming at the SEAL position. One shot from that weapon would end everything. She fired before he could. 4. The pattern continued. Methodical, patient. Each target selected based on threat priority. Each shot placed with the kind of precision that looked effortless but required absolute control. Radio operators, mortar spotters, machine gun crews, squad leaders. Anyone who could coordinate the enemy assault or deliver decisive firepower. 5, 6, 7, 8. Her trigger finger never rushed, never hesitated, just squeezed with that same 1.5 pounds of pressure over and over, each shot identical to the last in everything except target location. 9 on 10. At position 11, something changed. As she fired, a bullet cracked past her own position, impacting 2 meters away. Close enough to feel the pressure wave. Close enough to know it wasn't random fire. Someone was shooting back. Someone who knew where to look. Calloway's jaw tightened. She'd been made. Somewhere out there, another professional had heard her shots, analyzed the pattern, and started hunting. Counter-sniper. The worst kind of problem. She had to move. But the SEALs were still pinned, still dying. She couldn't abandon them now. She made her choice in half a heartbeat. Keep shooting. Keep the SEALs alive. Deal with the hunter when he got close enough to matter. 11, 12. Another round cracked past, closer this time. 30 centimeters. The hunter was narrowing his search, using her muzzle flash, triangulating her position with professional skill. 13. She fired again, then immediately started breaking down her hide. No time for careful concealment. Just grab essential gear and move. The rifle stayed assembled, held it ready. Her rucksack left behind too much weight, too slow. Another enemy round impacted where she'd been 3 seconds earlier. The hunter was good, very good. Former military, certainly. Trained to the same standards she'd been trained to. Possibly trained by the same people. She combat crawled through the jungle, staying low, using terrain to mask her movement. Behind her, more rounds searched the area where she'd been. The hunter was firing systematically, trying to flush her or get lucky. He wouldn't get lucky. But he'd found her general area, and that was problem enough. 150 meters from her original position, she found a new spot. Different angle, different elevation, longer range, but still workable. She settled in, took 3 seconds to verify her new data, and found another target. 14. The fight was turning. She could see it through her scope. Enemy fighters hesitating, attacks stalling, the coordination falling apart as she removed their leadership piece by piece. The SEALs were using the breathing room, redistributing ammunition, treating wounded, shoring up their defense. They might survive this, if she could keep the pressure on, if the hunter didn't find her first. She heard it on the radio then, a voice speaking English with a Russian accent using captured American frequency. "You're very good, Ghost. Yes, I know who you are." Her finger paused on the trigger. Just for a moment. The voice continued. "Project Wraith, disavowed 2023. Bad intelligence killed your team. You survived. They blamed you. I have your file right here. Callaway Reeves, 34 years old. Best precision shooter your program ever produced. And now you're trying to be a hero again." She didn't respond, didn't give him anything, just kept scanning for targets. "I'm Viktor Sokolov, former Spetsnaz. Now I'm a professional like you used to be. And I'm being paid very well to make sure those SEALs don't leave that valley. Which means you've become a problem I need to solve." Callaway found another target. Fired. 15. Sokolov's voice came back impressed. "Still working. Still professional. Good. This will be more interesting than I thought." She relocated again. The hunter would have her position from that shot. Standard counter-sniper doctrine: never fire twice from the same spot. Never give your opponent a pattern to exploit. 16, 17. The enemy assault was breaking now. Too many leaders dead. Too many heavy weapons neutralized. Too much confusion and fear spreading through ranks that had expected an easy kill. Some were pulling back. Others were trying to rally. None of them knew where death was coming from, only that it was precise and inevitable. 18, 19, 20. Callaway's breathing stayed controlled. Her heart rate never elevated. This was what she'd trained for, what she was built for. The thing she did better than anyone else in her generation. The reason Project Wraith had recruited her. The reason they'd tried so hard to destroy her when they needed someone to blame. 21, 22. Another round from Sokolov searching for her. He was good, professional, but she was better. Had always been better. The records proved it, even if those records were classified, buried, officially non-existent. 23, 24. One target left. Priority target. A fighter with explosive vests sprinting toward the SEAL position, trying to martyr himself, take Americans with him when he died. 698 meters. Moving fast. High priority. She led him by 2 meters. Squeezed. The bullet flew true. He dropped 50 meters from the SEALs, the threat eliminated before it could materialize. 25. Silence fell across the valley. 8 minutes had elapsed since her first shot. 25 precision kills. 25 rounds expended. Perfect accuracy. 0 wasted ammunition. The enemy assault had collapsed completely. Through her scope, Callaway scanned for additional threats. Found none. The surviving fighters were pulling back, dragging wounded, abandoning the attack. Whatever they'd been paid, it wasn't enough to justify facing an invisible enemy who never missed. On the radio, Thornton's voice, stunned, exhausted, alive. "Unknown station. What just happened?" She didn't answer. Not yet. Just continued scanning, making absolutely certain the threat was neutralized, the SEALs were safe. Sokolov's voice came one last time. Different tone now. Respect mixed with calculation. "Impressive, Ghost. 25 shots, all kills. And you outpositioned me the entire time. Your file didn't exaggerate. We'll meet again. I'm sure of it." Then silence. He'd withdrawn. Professional enough to know when a contract wasn't worth dying for. Smart enough to recognize when he was outmatched. Callaway lowered her rifle. Let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The adrenaline was starting to fade now, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Her hands trembled slightly, normal post-combat physiological response. She'd saved them. 12 men who should have died were still breathing. 12 families wouldn't get the visit they dreaded. 12 sets of dog tags wouldn't be going home in a box. She pulled out the challenge coin one more time, looked at it, thought about the 3 operators who hadn't come home 2 years ago, thought about how she'd been blamed for their deaths, disavowed, erased, thought about how none of that mattered anymore, because today at least she'd done what she'd been trained to do. what she'd been born to do, protect the ones who couldn't protect themselves. She stood, packed her rifle with practiced efficiency, and started moving down toward the valley. Time to face the men she'd just saved. Time to step out of the shadows and be seen. Time to stop being a ghost, at least for a few minutes. The mathematics of death at distance followed rules most people never learned. Wind speed converted to minutes of angle, humidity affecting bullet drag, temperature changing powder burn rates, atmospheric pressure altering trajectory in ways so subtle they only mattered when precision was everything. Callaway Reeves knew these rules the way most people knew breathing. Her first shot had been textbook execution. Environmental factors calculated, ballistic compensation dialed, trigger squeeze time between heartbeats, 823 meters. The machine gunner had never known what killed him. Now 90 seconds into the engagement, she was settling into the rhythm that made her different from every other precision shooter she'd ever met. Not faster, not stronger, just utterly, completely calm under conditions that would make most people shake themselves apart. Her breathing stayed at 6 cycles per minute. Her heart rate held at 52 beats. Her hands were rock steady on the rifle despite the rain, the wind, the knowledge that somewhere out there another professional was hunting her. Through the Schmidt and Bender optics, the valley resolved into crystal clarity. Every rock, every tree, every human shape moving with the particular urgency of combat. The SEAL team was pinned in a natural depression using whatever cover they could find, taking fire from positions that had clearly been prepared days in advance. Someone had wanted them in that exact spot. Someone had orchestrated this with professional precision. And someone was about to learn that orchestration worked both ways. Target 2 had been the assistant gunner scrambling to take over the weapon his partner had just died behind. Callaway put a round through his center mass before his hands reached the machine gun's grip. The weapon sat silent, now unmanned, its suppressive fire ended. The SEAL team had breathing room. Seconds, maybe a full minute. Enough time to redistribute ammunition, assess casualties, remember they were still alive. Callaway was already scanning for Target 3. Squad leader, older than the others, moving with authority, hand signaling to fighters on the flanks. He was coordinating the assault, keeping his people organized despite the sudden loss of their heavy weapon. A professional, dangerous because he could adapt. She watched him through the scope, watched him raise his arm to signal a flanking maneuver, watched him start to speak into his radio. The bullet took him mid-gesture. His arm stayed raised for a moment, frozen in death's brief confusion, then he collapsed sideways. 3. Down in the valley, the SEAL team was beginning to understand something impossible was happening. Cole's voice came through the radio, talking fast to Thornton. "Chief, that's not air support. No engine noise. No rotors. That's a single rifle." "What?" "Listen to the spacing. 15 to 20 seconds between shots. Same weapon, same shooter. One person is doing this." Thornton's response was disbelief fighting with hope. Where the hell are they?" "I don't know, but they're keeping us alive." Callaway didn't hear them. Her world existed inside a bubble of absolute focus where nothing mattered except the target, the wind, the slight tremor of leaves that told her air movement at different ranges. She found Target 4 immediately. RPG gunner, priority threat. The launcher was already on his shoulder, his eye pressed to the simple iron sight finger, moving toward the trigger. One rocket into the SEAL position would end everything she'd done so far. Would turn 12 living men into casualties, too broken to count. She fired before his finger completed its motion. The gunner dropped. The launcher fell unfired, tumbling down the slope, harmless metal and explosive that would never reach its intended target. 4. Her bolt worked smoothly, brass ejected, new round chambered. The action took less than a second, automatic after 10,000 repetitions. Her cheek never left the stock. Her eye never left the scope. The rifle was an extension of her body responding to thought faster than conscious command. Target 5 appeared in her sight picture. Radio operator hunched behind inadequate cover, speaking urgently into a handset. Coordinating reinforcements maybe. Calling for instructions. Trying to make sense of what was happening to his carefully planned ambush. Callaway's bullet made sense of it for him. 5. The pattern continued. Each target selected based on threat, priority, and opportunity. Each shot placed with precision that looked effortless but required absolute control of every variable. Breathing, heartbeat, muscle tension, mental state, All of it had to align perfectly in the moment the trigger broke. Mortar spotter at 889 meters using binoculars to call corrections. The lens reflection gave him away a tiny flash of light that shouldn't exist in that shadow. 6. Heavy weapons carrier at 765 meters, moving fresh ammunition to a machine gun position. He died with belt-fed rounds draped over his shoulders, the weight pulling him down as he fell. 7. Fighter with binoculars at 903 meters, partially concealed behind a tree trunk. She waited 8 seconds for him to shift position, expose himself enough for the shot. Wishen's was the sniper's deadliest weapon. Her instructor had taught her that. Colonel Emmett Bridger a lifetime ago when she'd been 26 and thought she understood what war meant. 8. Ammunition resupply runner at 678 meters, jogging between positions with an AK-47 and full chest rig. She led him by 1.2 meters, squeezed, watched him drop mid-stride. 9. Secondary radio operator at 834 meters, trying to re-establish command and control after his predecessor died. The enemy communications network was fracturing leaders, unable to coordinate fighters, unable to receive orders. Chaos was spreading through their ranks like a disease. 10. Calloway's technique never varied. Same breathing rhythm, same trigger discipline, same patient calculation between each shot. This wasn't reactive shooting. This was surgical removal of threats, prioritized and executed with the kind of precision that took years to develop and could never be rushed. Through her earpiece, she could hear the SEAL team adapting to their unexpected advantage. Thornton giving orders, Cole providing covering fire, wounded being moved to better cover, ammunition being redistributed from those who could no longer fight to those who still could. They were professionals. Given any chance at all, they'd exploit it perfectly. She was giving them that chance, one shot at a time. Then everything changed. At shot 11, as her bullet flew downrange toward a squad leader, trying to rally his scattered fighters, another bullet cracked past her position, not close enough to hit, close enough to announce itself, close enough to say, "I know you're there." The round impacted 2.5 meters from her hide, throwing mud and vegetation. A ranging shot, professional counter-sniper work. Someone had been listening to her shots, analyzing the sound, triangulating her probable location. Someone very good was hunting her now. Calloway's jaw tightened fractionally. The only outward sign of concern. Her hands stayed steady, her breathing stayed controlled. But her mind shifted gears, adding a new variable to calculations that were already complex enough. Enemy sniper. Unknown range, unknown position, demonstrably skilled, actively searching for her. She had two choices: relocate immediately, abandon the SEALs to their fate, save herself, or keep shooting, keep the pressure on, accept the risk that the next bullet might not miss. Her finger never left the trigger. 11. The squad leader dropped. The enemy assault lost another coordinator. The surviving fighters were scattering now, their careful plan dissolving into individual survival instinct. Another round from her hunter. Closer this time, 30 centimeters. He was narrowing the search area using her muzzle flash, analyzing angles. Standard counter-sniper doctrine. She taught the same techniques to others once, back when Project Wraith existed, and her job was making elite shooters even better. Now someone was using those techniques against her. 12. She fired again, tagging a fighter who'd been moving toward a better firing position. Then she immediately broke down her hide. No time for careful concealment. Just grab the rifle, leave. Everything else moved now. She rolled left, combat crawling through mud and vegetation, putting distance between herself and the position that was compromised. Behind her, another enemy round impacted exactly where she'd been 3 seconds earlier. The hunter was very good indeed, 150 meters of movement through terrain that wanted to catch her, slow her, expose her. She stayed low, using every depression, every shadow, every piece of cover. The old skills from countless training exercises and operations that officially never happened. Moving like water, finding downhill paths, silent, invisible. She found a new position with different elevation and angle. Longer range now, 921 meters to the valley floor, but still workable. She settled in fast, no time for perfect stability, just good enough. Dialed her scope for the new distance, compensated for the different wind angle. Found another target, 14. Down in the valley, the momentum was shifting. The enemy force that had been so confident, so coordinated, was starting to break. Too many leaders dead, too many heavy weapons silenced, too much confusion about where the killing was coming from. The SEALs were holding, wounded but fighting, low on ammunition but making every round count. 12 men refusing to die because someone they couldn't see was keeping them alive. Calloway's radio crackled, a voice speaking English with a Russian accent using captured American encryption. "You're very good, Ghost. Yes, I know who you are." She didn't respond, didn't give him anything to work with, just kept scanning through her scope, looking for the next threat to the SEAL team. The voice continued, almost conversational. "Project Wraith, disavowed 2023 after Afghanistan. Bad intelligence killed your team. Sergeant Major Dixon, Sergeant Colby, Corporal Martinez, 3 Americans dead because someone gave you wrong information. And then they blamed you for it." Calloway's hand tightened on the rifle's foregrip, just slightly, the only physical reaction to hearing names she tried not to think about. "I'm Viktor Sokolov, former Spetsnaz sniper, dishonorably discharged after Crimea operations. Now I work for whoever pays. And today I'm being paid very well to make sure those SEALs don't leave this valley, which makes you an expensive problem." She found another target, fighter trying to reposition a machine gun. She put a round through him before he could complete the move. 15. Sokolov's voice came back and she could hear genuine respect underneath the tactical calculation. "You're consistent, Ghost. Mission over self-preservation. That's the mark of true elite training. Makes you predictable, though. And predictability kills." Calloway relocated again. "Standard doctrine, never shoot twice from the same position when there's an active counter-sniper." She moved 60 meters, found new cover settled in. 16, 17. Each shot bought the SEAL team more time. Each kill reduced the enemy's ability to coordinate. Each dead leader meant more confusion, more hesitation, more fighters deciding this contract wasn't worth dying for. But Sokolov was closing in. She could feel it, could sense him narrowing the search, using every shot she took to triangulate, to reduce the possibilities, to zero in on where she had to be. She heard him fire again. The bullet cracked through the space she'd occupied 30 seconds ago. He was tracking her movement now, reading her doctrine, anticipating where she'd relocate. He was very, very good. 18, 19. The enemy assault was actively collapsing now. Fighters pulling back, wounded being dragged to cover, the organized attack turning into scattered resistance. But they weren't broken yet, weren't ready to give up completely. As long as they stayed in the fight, the SEALs were still in danger. 20. Calloway shifted position again. The hunter was too close now, too accurate. She had to change patterns, do something unexpected. Instead of moving laterally along the ridge, she dropped elevation, moving downslope toward the valley floor. Closer to the fight, closer to the danger. Exactly where a trained counter-sniper wouldn't expect her to go. She found new cover at 712 meters. Much closer now, close enough to hear the sounds of combat directly, not filtered through radio. Close enough to smell the propellant in blood. 21. Her target dropped. Then 22, 23. The kills came faster now, at closer range, less wind compensation needed, less time for bullets to drift or drop. Sokolov's voice again. "You moved closer. Bold. Stupid or brilliant, I haven't decided yet. But it won't save you. Or them." Then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Not a rifle shot, a radio transmission on the enemy frequency. Sokolov speaking in Russian, giving orders. She'd learned Russian during her time with Project Wraith. Operational necessity. Know your enemy's language, understand their doctrine, and anticipate their moves. What she heard now was Sokolov calling in reinforcements. 20 additional fighters held in reserve, now being committed. And he was giving them real-time updates on the SEAL positions, information he could only have gotten from one source. Someone on the American side was feeding him intelligence. She keyed her radio, spoke for the first time since her initial contact with the SEAL team. "Bravo, unknown station. You have reinforcements inbound from your 6 o'clock. 20 additional fighters. 5 mics out." Thornton's response was immediate. "Who is this? How do you know that?" "I'm monitoring enemy communications. They have someone feeding them your positions in real time." Someone on our side is coordinating this ambush. Silence for a moment. Then Thornton's voice harder now, understanding what that meant. Confirm you're friendly. Confirm I'm the one who's been keeping you alive for the last 6 minutes. Copy that. We owe you. Can you hit those reinforcements? Working on it. She shifted her scope, scanning the tree line where the new fighters would emerge. Found them moving through the jungle in tactical column. Professional movement. Good spacing. These weren't random militia. These were trained soldiers working as mercenaries. She'd have to break their assault before it could develop. Had to hit them hard enough that they'd lose cohesion, scatter, give up on the attack. 24, the lead fighter dropped. The column halted, confused. They hadn't expected to take fire from this angle, hadn't expected to be hit before they even reached the fight. 25. Second fighter down, squad leader from his position in the formation. The remaining fighters dove for cover, the column breaking apart, tactical discipline dissolving into self-preservation. 8 minutes had elapsed since her first shot. 25 precision kills, 25 rounds expended. Perfect accuracy across ranges from 678 meters to 921 meters. 0 wasted ammunition, 0 missed shots. The kind of performance that existed in classified records with her name attached, records that supposedly didn't exist anymore. The enemy assault broke completely, fighters retreating, wounded being abandoned, equipment left behind. The survivors had lost all cohesion, all willingness to continue. Whatever they'd been paid, whatever cause they'd been fighting for, it wasn't worth facing an invisible enemy who never missed. The valley fell quiet except for the rain and the occasional moan from wounded fighters on both sides. Through her scope, Calloway scanned for additional threats. Found none, but the battle was over. The SEAL team had survived. 12 men who should have died were still breathing. Sokolov's voice came one last time. Different tone now. Professional respect mixed with tactical calculation. 25 shots, all kills, perfect execution. You outpositioned me at every turn. Your classified file didn't exaggerate, Ghost. You really are the best I've ever faced. She didn't respond. Just kept scanning. Kept her rifle ready. But this contract isn't over, Sokolov continued. My employers want those SEALs dead. Want you dead now, too. And they're paying enough that I'll be back. With better equipment, better intelligence, better planning. We will meet again. I'm certain of it. Then his transmission ended. He was withdrawing, professional enough to know when a tactical situation was lost, smart enough to preserve himself for another day. Calloway lowered her rifle slowly, let out a long breath. The adrenaline was starting to fade now, leaving exhaustion and the faint tremor in her hands that always came after sustained combat. She'd done it. Against a professional counter-sniper, against prepared positions, against reinforcements and coordination, she'd kept 12 men alive through pure shooting skill and tactical adaptation. But it wasn't over. Sokolov had said as much. His employers wanted the SEAL team dead, and now they wanted her dead too. This wasn't random combat. This was orchestrated assassination, and she'd just become part of the target list. She pulled out the challenge coin, looked at it in the rain-filtered light. Project Wraith insignia. 3 operators who died 2 years ago because of bad intelligence. Bad intelligence that was starting to look less like mistake and more like murder. Sergeant Major Dixon's face came back to her. The way he looked at her during their last mission, trusting her judgment, believing in her skill. The way he died because someone had deliberately put them in a kill zone. Just like someone had deliberately put Thornton's team in this valley today. The pattern was becoming clear. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to prove it. She stood packed, her rifle with practiced efficiency, and started moving down toward the valley. Her body protested, muscles tight from sustained prone position, hands cramping from gripping the rifle for 8 minutes straight. But she moved smoothly anyway, covering the 700 meters down to the valley floor with the careful approach of someone entering a potential trap. The fighting was over, but that didn't mean it was safe. She stopped 50 meters from the SEAL perimeter, made enough noise to announce herself. No sudden movements. No reason to get shot by the people she'd just saved. Friendly approaching, ground team Bravo. I'm the Overwatch you've been hearing. Weapons came up immediately. 12 rifles trained on the jungle. Thornton's voice commanding but strained. Come forward, slowly. Hands visible, identify yourself. Calloway stepped into view. Rifle slung across her back, barrel down, hands raised slightly. A woman 34 slight build wearing contractor clothes soaked through with rain and mud. Not military uniform, not obvious operator, just someone who looked like she shouldn't be here. The SEALs stared at her like she'd materialized from nowhere, because in a way she had. Ghost did that. Cole was the first to speak, his voice mixing disbelief with something approaching awe. That's, that's you. You're the one who just... Yes, she said simply, not elaborating, not explaining, just confirming the impossible thing they were all thinking. Thornton limped forward, favoring his left leg where shrapnel had torn through muscle. His face was weathered and hard, the face of someone who'd survived 21 years through skill and stubbornness. But his eyes showed something different now. Confusion fighting with respect. Ma'am, who the hell are you? Calloway Reeves, civilian contractor. I was at the T-Oak when you called for help. Nobody was sending it, so I came. You came by yourself into hostile territory against 30-plus fighters. 25, she corrected quietly. There were 25. Now there aren't. The team exchanged glances, processing what that meant. One shooter, 25 kills, perfect accuracy, the kind of performance that shouldn't be possible. Calloway moved toward the nearest wounded SEAL, a petty officer with shrapnel wounds across his shoulder and chest. She knelt beside him, pulling a tourniquet from her kit. Let me help with your wounded. We need to stabilize them before the medevac arrives. As she worked, something fell from her jacket pocket. A metallic clink against stone. The challenge coin landing face up in the mud. Cole was closest. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand, and his entire expression changed. Chief, you need to see this. Thornton took the coin, studied it carefully. His weathered face went very still. This is Project Wraith. Every SEAL in the perimeter went quiet. They all knew what that meant. Knew the rumors about the program that officially never existed. The Tier 1 sniper unit that had been shut down, operators scattered or disavowed, missions erased from every database. Only 12 operators had ever carried these coins, and most of them were dead. Thornton looked at Calloway with new understanding. You were Wraith, before they shut it down, before they disavowed everyone. She didn't answer, just continued working on the wounded man's injuries, her hands steady and professional. Cole was staring at her forearm. Her sleeve had ridden up during treatment, exposing a faded tattoo, a specific design that made his eyes widen further. Chief, her ink. That's from the elite selection course. The program before Wraith. Only the top 3 graduates each year got that mark. Thornton saw it too. Recognized it because he'd attended the same school 18 years ago. Different era, but same tradition. His entire posture shifted, the kind of respect that came from recognizing true elite capability. Ma'am, how many operations did you run with Wraith? Calloway finished securing the tourniquet before answering. 37 confirmed. Multiple others that stay classified. Success rate, 100% mission completion until the 38th. What happened on 38? Her hands paused for just a moment. Bad intelligence. My team walked into an ambush in Afghanistan. 3 KIA. I was the only survivor. They blamed me for tactical hesitation and shut down the program. Thornton nodded slowly, understanding what that meant. Understanding that the same thing had almost happened to his team today. Before he could respond, 3 enemy fighters burst from the tree line 40 meters away. Survivors from the earlier assault making one desperate final attempt. Maybe trying to kill Americans out of rage. Maybe trying to escape and got turned around. It didn't matter. The SEAL team reacted, but they were exhausted, wounded, low on ammunition. Weapons came up, but not fast enough. These were operators at the end of their physical capacity, running on fumes. Calloway's rifle was in her hands before any of them processed the threat. 3 shots. Under 2 seconds. The first fighter left flank center mass 41 meters. The second center position headshot 38 meters. The third right flank center mass 43 meters. All 3 dropped before a single SEAL pulled their trigger. The entire team froze, staring at her, staring at the 3 bodies, staring at the rifle still mounted to her shoulder. Her breathing completely controlled, her stance perfect. Cole's whisper broke the silence. That's not human. That's something else entirely. Thornton approached her slowly. His leg wound was bleeding again, but he ignored it. Came to attention despite the pain, despite the exhaustion. Raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. Not protocol, she was civilian. Salutes weren't required or expected. But this wasn't about protocol. This was about respect earned in the only way that mattered, through capability demonstrated under conditions where failure meant death. "Ma'am," Thornton said quietly, "thank you doesn't begin to cover what you did here today." He reached into his vest, pulled out a challenge coin, worn smooth by 15 years of carry. His personal SEAL team coin carried through multiple deployments, firefights, operations that would never be discussed. He placed it in her hand. "You earned this. You're one of us now. Brotherhood doesn't require a uniform or a rank, just mutual respect and shared sacrifice." Calloway looked at the coin, looked at these 12 men who just accepted her into something that couldn't be purchased or demanded. Only earned. She nodded once. A small movement. Acknowledgement without pride. Acceptance without celebration. "We need to move," she said quietly. "Sokolov said his employers want you dead. They'll try again. And next time they'll come prepared for me." Sokolov, Thornton's eyes sharpened. Russian counter-sniper, former Spetsnaz. "You know him. Know of him. He's worked against American interests for years. High-level mercenary, expensive, professional." Thornton paused. "If he's involved, someone with serious resources wants us eliminated." "More than that," Calloway said. "Someone on our side is feeding them intelligence. Real-time positions. Communications frequencies. They knew exactly where you'd be and when. This wasn't random. The implications settled over the team like a weight. Someone in the American command structure had set them up to die. Had orchestrated this ambush with foreign mercenaries. Had committed treason that should have resulted in 12 dead SEALs. In the distance, the sound of helicopter rotors finally emerged. The storm was breaking. Medevac was inbound. The cavalry was arriving too late as always, but arriving nonetheless. Thornton keyed his radio. "TOC Ground Team Bravo. Situation stabilized. We have 4 urgent surgical, 6 routine, 2 KIA. Request immediate medevac and QRF support." The response came from a different voice than Captain Vance. Another officer confused. "Bravo, how did you stabilize? We show you black on ammunition surrounded KIA mounting." "We had help, TOC, unexpected help. Situation report to follow on return to base." Calloway was already moving toward the perimeter, trying to fade back into the shadows before the helicopters arrived, before more people saw her, before she had to explain things that couldn't be explained. Thornton caught her arm gently. "Where are you going?" "Back to being invisible. It's what I do best." "Not this time. You're coming back with us. You need to tell Command what you know about the intelligence leak, about Sokolov, about whoever set this up." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to disappear, to go back to being the quiet contractor nobody noticed, to avoid the spotlight that had destroyed her career once already. But Thornton was right. This wasn't over. Sokolov would be back, his employers would try again, and 12 men would die next time if someone didn't stop the rot inside the American command structure. "All right," she said finally, "but when this goes bad, when they try to blame someone, remember what really happened here." "It won't go bad," Thornton promised. "We've got your back now, all of us." The helicopters arrived 5 minutes later, 2 MH-60 Blackhawks rotors beating against clearing skies. The wounded were loaded first, then the rest of the team. Calloway rode in the second bird, sitting quietly among operators who kept stealing glances at her. The woman who'd saved them. The ghost who'd materialized from nowhere and killed 25 enemy fighters with 25 shots. The operator who moved like wind and shot like destiny itself. They didn't know what to say to her, didn't know how to process what they'd witnessed. So they said nothing. Just sat in grateful silence as the helicopters carried them back to Phobie B. Redstone. Back to safety, back to life they'd been certain they'd lost. Calloway stared out the open door at the jungle passing below, thinking about Sokolov's words, thinking about the pattern emerging, thinking about 3 operators who died 2 years ago for reasons that were starting to make terrible sense. The helicopter banked toward the base. The fob came into view, and with it the reckoning that was waiting. Because Captain Vance was down there. The man who'd refused to send help. The man whose encrypted phone had received a message just before the ambush started. and Calloway was done being invisible. The Blackhawks touched down at Faux Redstone in a storm of rotor wash and red dust. Medical teams swarmed the landing zone before the skids fully settled, stretchers ready trauma kits, open voices shouting coordinates and injury assessments over the dying whine of turbines. Calloway stayed back while the wounded were unloaded. Thornton went out first despite his leg wound, refusing the stretcher, limping beside his men who needed it more. Cole helped carry Petty Officer Briggs, the one Calloway had tourniqueted in the valley. The man was pale but breathing alive because someone had known exactly how to stop arterial bleeding under fire. She was the last off the helicopter, stepped down onto the tarmac with her rifle still slung across her back, mud coating her from chest to boots, rain-soaked hair plastered to her skull. She looked like she'd crawled through hell, looked like someone who shouldn't be standing. But she was standing, and her eyes were clear. Intelligence officers converged immediately. Two captains she didn't recognize, both carrying tablets, both wearing expressions that said they had forms to fill and procedures to follow. The taller one spoke first. "Ma'am, we need a full operational debrief, tactical report, ammunition expenditure documentation, rules of engagement verification." Calloway's voice came out quiet, the kind of quiet that made people lean in to hear. "There's nothing to record. I was never there. That's not how this works. You engaged enemy combatants in an active theater. We need documentation for you can't document what you can't prove happened, and you can't prove I was in that valley." The intelligence officer's face tightened with frustration. "Ma'am, 25 enemy KIA. That's not something we can just ignore." "Then don't ignore it. Attribute it to air support that arrived late. Attribute it to the SEAL team's exceptional marksmanship. I don't care, but my name doesn't appear in any report." "Why not?" "Because ghosts don't exist in official records. Because the moment her name appeared in a database, people who wanted her dead would know exactly where to find her. Because she'd learned 2 years ago that official recognition was just another word for target designation." But she didn't say any of that, just met the officer's eyes until he looked away. Captain Hollis Vance emerged from the Tactical Operations Centers like a storm front, 49 years old, carrying himself with the rigid authority of someone who needed control to breathe. His face had gone pale when the helicopters appeared on approach, had gone paler still when Calloway Reeves stepped off alive. He'd expected her to die, expected the SEAL team to die, expected a neat resolution to a problem that was threatening to expose things that needed to stay buried. Instead, she was walking toward him with eyes that knew too much. "Miss Reeves," his voice came out hard, "you directly violated my orders. You inserted yourself into tactical operations without authorization. You endangered classified protocols. You're under investigation for—" Thornton's voice cut across the landing zone. "With respect, Captain, she saved my entire team when you refused to send help." Vance's jaw tightened. "That's not the point. Chain of command matters. Discipline matters. We can't have civilians deciding which orders to follow." 12 Americans are alive because of her," Thornton said. Each word measured, each word weighted with the kind of respect that came from watching someone do the impossible. "That's the only point that matters." Other SEALs were gathering now, moving to stand behind Thornton despite their wounds. A physical statement, a line drawn without words. Vance saw it happening, saw his authority fracturing in real time. His hand moved toward his sidearm, subtle but present, a gesture of threat wrapped in the pretense of adjustment. Calloway saw it. Her body language didn't change, didn't shift into combat stance, didn't telegraph anything, just noted the movement and filed it away with all the other pieces that were starting to form a picture. Before the confrontation could escalate, a young specialist approached. Female mid-20s wearing signals intelligence insignia. She moved with the careful deliberation of someone doing something dangerous. Specialist Emma Garrett caught Calloway's eye, then glanced toward an isolated area away from the crowd. A silent request, a moment of privacy that carried weight. Calloway followed her 50 meters from the landing zone out of immediate earshot. Garrett pulled a small thumb drive from her cargo pocket, pressed it into Calloway's palm. "Ma'am, I monitor all base communications, including encrypted channels." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You need to see this before it disappears. I made backup copies." "What am I looking at?" 8 years of Captain Vance coordinating with foreign intelligence, financial records, Communication logs, everything. Garrett's eyes held fear and determination in equal measure. Your team in Afghanistan, the one that got ambushed 2 years ago, it's in there. Vance set them up, just like he set up the SEAL team today. Calloway's hand closed around the drive. Why are you giving this to me? Because 23 Americans are dead over 8 years because of him. Because I took an oath. Because someone needs to stop this before more people die. Garrett paused. And because I heard what you did in that valley. If anyone can survive what's coming, it's you. She disappeared back into the crowd before Calloway could respond. The thumb drive felt like it weighed 10 pounds. Calloway found an isolated computer terminal in an auxiliary communications bunker. Logged in using credentials that weren't technically hers but worked anyway. Inserted the drive. The files opened with encryption keys Garrett had thoughtfully included. What she found made her hands go very still on the keyboard. Financial records showing offshore accounts in Vance's name. $2.7 million over 8 years. Payments traced back to shell companies that eventually connected to Russian intelligence cutouts. A paper trail that would hold up in any court if it ever got that far. Communication logs between Vance and someone identified only as Handler 6. Encrypted messages detailing American operations patrol routes, asset positions. Information that should never leave secure channels. Information that got people killed. One message dated 4 days ago stood out. SEAL team carrying classified intel regarding Operation Crosswind must be eliminated. Window closes in 4 days. Payment $500K. Vance's response, team will be deployed to pre-selected kill zone. Local assets plus counter sniper hired. Situation will be sanitized. The counter sniper, Sokolov. Vance had hired him specifically to kill Thornton's team, had orchestrated the entire ambush down to the last detail. Calloway scrolled deeper, found older files, found a message dated October 17, 2023, the date that had been burned into her memory for 2 years. Wraith team has intercepted communications regarding Crosswind. All assets must be eliminated. Recommend ambush during Op Sentinel Dawn. Operation Sentinel Dawn. The mission that killed her team. The mission that had been blamed on her tactical hesitation. The mission that destroyed her career and scattered Project Wraith into classified history. It hadn't been her fault. Had never been her fault. Someone had deliberately murdered 3 American operators to protect a conspiracy. Had blamed the survivor to ensure she'd be discredited if she ever tried to expose the truth. Sergeant Major Dixon's face came back to her. The way he'd looked at her during their last conversation, trusting her judgment, believing in her assessment. The way he died because someone needed him silent. Sergeant Colby, 29 years old, new father. Had shown her pictures of his daughter 3 months old before they deployed. Corporal Martinez, first-generation American. Parents had immigrated from Colombia. She'd been so proud to serve, so determined to honor their sacrifice. All dead. Not because of enemy action, not because of tactical error, but because an American captain was selling classified information to foreign powers and needed witnesses eliminated. Calloway's hands weren't shaking. That would come later. Right now, she existed in a state of absolute clarity. The kind that came before violence, before justice, before the world learned what happened when you push someone too far. She copied the files to a secondary drive, then a third. Redundancy, because evidence had a way of disappearing when powerful people wanted it gone. Then she stood and walked toward Vance's office. The office was exactly what she'd expected. Neat, organized, everything in its proper place. Maps on the walls showing current operations, a desk with computer terminals and communication equipment, a window overlooking the base perimeter. Vance was at his desk when she entered without knocking. His hand moved toward a drawer, toward the sidearm he kept there, but froze when he saw her expression. "Who paid you to kill my team?" Her voice came out flat, affectless, the tone of someone past anger, past grief, into the territory where emotion became irrelevant. "I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of my office." She placed printed evidence on his desk. Financial records, communication logs. The message about Operation Sentinel Dawn. October 17, 2023, Afghanistan. You sent my team into an ambush. Sergeant Major Dixon. Sergeant Colby, Corporal Martinez. 3 Americans died because you sold them out for $350,000. Vance's face went through several expressions. Denial, calculation, fear, then something harder. The look of a man who'd gone too far to turn back. You have no proof that will hold up. You're disavowed, no credibility, history of insubordination. Any accusation you make gets dismissed as conspiracy theory from a bitter contractor. I have 8 years of encrypted communications, financial records, and a federal analyst willing to testify. Garrett, Vance's voice turned cold, she'll have an accident. People die in war zones all the time. Is that a confession? It's a reality. You don't understand the stakes. The people I work for, they're everywhere. Senators, generals, intelligence officials at the highest levels. You can't fight this. You can't win. Calloway took one step closer. I already won. Your SEAL team survived. I survived. And now everyone's going to know exactly what you did. Vance's hand moved toward the desk drawer again. Calloway's voice stopped him. Don't. I'm faster and we both know it. I've made 25 shots today. I won't miss number 26. His hand froze, stayed frozen while someone knocked on the door. Thornton entered without waiting for acknowledgement. Cole followed, both carrying expressions that said they'd heard enough through the thin walls to understand what was happening. Cole was holding his own tablet. Sir, we just received copies of very interesting communications. Specialist Garrett was kind enough to share them with the entire SEAL team, and with base security, and with the JAG officer. Vance's face went white. You can't prove any of this. It's falsified. Manufactured evidence from a disgraced operator and a naive analyst who doesn't understand. The office door opened again. Base security entered, led by a master-at-arms with 20 years of service and eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by rank. Captain Vance, you're ordered to remain in this office pending investigation. Sir, I'm going to need your sidearm and communication devices. Vance stood slowly, his last card left to play. He pulled out his phone, showed an encrypted message on the screen. You think you've won? Vance's smile turned cold. My employers have assets everywhere, including inside this room. He looked directly at one of the base security MPs. The young corporal's hand moved towards his sidearm, not to secure Vance, to draw on Thornton. Calloway's rifle was up before anyone else moved. Don't! The corporal froze. His face showed no emotion, no fear, just the blank expression of someone following orders from a different chain of command. Vance laughed. You see, they're everywhere. And outside this base right now, 40 mercenaries. Sokolov is back. This time everyone dies. He tapped something on the phone. An alert signal. Base alarms erupted across the lobby, loudspeakers blaring. Incoming attack. All personnel to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Through the window, Calloway could see mortar rounds impacting the perimeter. Could hear the distinctive chatter of automatic weapons. Could see muzzle flashes from the tree line. 40 professional fighters launched a coordinated assault on 3 gates simultaneously. Vance smiled, the expression of a man who'd just played his final move. Ghost, this ends tonight. You, the SEALs, the analyst, all of you die or my employers don't pay the final installment. Nothing personal, just business. Sokolov's voice came through emergency radio frequencies. Actually, Ghost, it's very personal now. You killed my spotter, made me look incompetent in front of my employers. So I'm going to make you watch your new friends die before I kill you. Consider it professional courtesy. Calloway looked at Thornton, at Cole, at the base security who were staring at her waiting for someone to give them direction. Then she looked at Vance with eyes that had gone absolutely cold. You made a mistake. You should have killed me when you had the chance. She walked out of the office toward the sound of gunfire. The watchtower offered perfect observation across the entire base perimeter. Calloway climbed the ladder with her rifle slung across her back, finding Cole already positioned at the top with a spotting scope and thermal optics. Below them, base defenders were scrambling to positions. Marines manning the gates, Rangers coordinating fields of fire. The quick reaction force had finally arrived, adding armored vehicles and heavy weapons to the defense. But the attackers were professionals, former military from multiple countries working as mercenaries equipped with night vision, and encrypted communications. They knew exactly where to hit, exactly how to exploit gaps in the perimeter. Someone had given them detailed intelligence about base defenses, someone like Vance, who'd been selling American lives for 8 years. Calloway settled into position behind her rifle. The Schmidt and Bender optics resolved the tree line into crystal clarity even in the failing light. She could see enemy positions, could see fighters moving to attack, could see the coordination that spoke of professional planning. Cole beside her, adjusting his spotting scope. Ma'am, I count 40-plus hostiles, 3 assault elements, heavy weapons on overwatch positions. Thermal signatures, checking now. He switched to thermal imaging. Multiple cold spots. They're using thermal camouflage, professional gear. Find me priority targets, squad leaders, heavy weapons, radio operators. Cole's voice took on a different quality. Focused, professional. The tone of someone who trained for this his entire career and was finally being given the chance to perform at the highest level. 320 degrees, 540 meters. Heavy machine gun team setting up. 3 personnel. Calloway's scope found them immediately. PKM machine gun. Crew of 3. Perfect overlapping fire position that would shred anyone trying to defend the North Gate. She dialed her scope. Atmospheric conditions. Wind, range. The math happened automatically now. Muscle memory and calculation merged into reflex. Team leader first, Cole said. He's directing placement. Confirmed. Her breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the reticle and the target. She fired. The team leader dropped. His crew froze for a moment, confused. Calloway worked the bolt, chambered another round, fired again. The gunner collapsed. Third shot. The assistant gunner went down, reaching for the weapon. 3 seconds. 3 kills. The heavy machine gun sat silent. Hit confirmed, Cole said. Next target, 090 degrees, 380 meters. RPG team, 2 personnel. They worked through targets systematically. Calloway shooting, Cole spotting. Their rhythm becoming seamless communication reduced to essential words, understanding building between them. Mortar crew chief at 540 meters. Squad leader coordinating the South Gate assault at 420 meters. Radio operator directing fire at 395 meters. Each target selected for maximum impact on enemy coordination. 8 kills in the first 3 minutes. The enemy assault was already losing cohesion. Cole's voice carried something new now. Not just professionalism, excitement. The realization that he was learning from someone operating at a level he'd only imagined. Ma'am, how do you stay so calm? My heart's pounding and I'm just spotting. Because I'm not fighting for me, I'm fighting for them. She indicated the base defenders below. That's the only thing that matters. She fired again. Breacher placing explosives on the wire fence. 410 meters. The explosives would never detonate now. Cole called the next target before she'd finished chambering the round. 470 degrees, 580 meters. Sniper position. Thermal signature. Calloway's scope found him. Elevated position in the tree line. Professional hide. Thermal camouflage making him hard to spot. He was targeting the watchtower. Targeting her. She fired first. The enemy sniper never got his shot off. Ma'am, Cole said quietly, you just saved my life. Focus. We're not done. But even as they worked, she could feel the pressure building. 40 attackers was too many. Even with her eliminating leaders and heavy weapons, even with base defenders putting up fierce resistance, the sheer numbers were overwhelming. And somewhere out there, Sokolov was watching, learning her patterns, preparing his own shot. She heard his voice on the radio, calm, professional, deadly serious. Ghost, I've been analyzing your shooting. You favor center mass shots at medium range, headshots at extreme range. You relocate every 3 to 4 shots. You prioritize leadership over heavy weapons when you have a choice. He'd been studying her, building a profile, learning her doctrine. There's one other thing I've noticed, Sokolov continued. You're protecting that watchtower, which means someone up there matters to you, someone you're teaching, young spotter perhaps. Cole's face went pale. Calloway's voice stayed absolutely calm. Cole, we're relocating. Now. They moved down the ladder fast, Calloway covering their descent. 30 seconds later, a high-velocity round punched through the watchtower's observation window, exactly where Cole's head had been. He's good, Cole breathed. So am I. They found new positions on the ground level, different angle, different elevation. Calloway settled in, scanned for Sokolov's position. Found nothing. He'd moved after his shot just like she would have. Two professionals hunting each other while a battle raged around them. The enemy assault was intensifying. 20 fighters breaching the north gate despite heavy casualties. Marines falling back to secondary positions. The base commander calling for all available personnel to reinforce. Calloway shifted her focus. If she couldn't find Sokolov, she'd eliminate his support, make him fight alone. She worked through enemy positions with mechanical precision. Squad leader rallying fighters for another push. Down. Radio operator coordinating mortar fire. Down. Heavy gunner providing suppression. Down. 12 kills. 15. 18. The enemy assault was fracturing again. Too many leaders dead. Too much confusion. But they kept coming, pushed forward by whatever contract they'd signed, whatever money they'd been promised. Then Cole spotted something that made his breath catch. Ma'am, thermal signature, extreme range, 1247 meters. That's him. That's Sokolov. Calloway found the position through her scope. Distant ridge, perfect counter-sniper placement. He was targeting Thornton, who was coordinating the defense from an exposed position near the command post. One shot from Sokolov and the entire defense would collapse. That's impossible, Cole said. 1,200 meters. Night conditions, variable wind, partial concealment. No one makes that shot. Calloway's voice came out absolutely certain. I don't miss. She settled into the shot, the longest, most complex shot of the entire engagement. Range alone made it difficult. The other variables made it nearly impossible. Night fighting, wind gusting between 5 and 8 knots, target only partially visible behind concrete barrier remnants. But she'd trained for this, had spent thousands of hours on ranges in simulators in real operations, had refined her skill to the point where impossible became merely difficult. She just needed one thing. Patience. Ma'am, he's not exposing himself enough for a kill shot. He will. He's a professional. He won't leave without taking his shot. They waited. 2 minutes. 3. The battle continued around them. The base defense holding by sheer determination. The enemy assault grinding forward despite horrific casualties. 4 minutes. Then Sokolov shifted. Moving to acquire a sight picture on Thornton. Brief exposure. 8 centimeters of killable target. 1.5 seconds of opportunity. Calloway had been waiting for exactly this moment. Her breathing was already controlled. Her heart rate already dropped. Her body already perfectly still. The crosshairs already settled on the precise point where his head would appear. He shifted. She fired. 1.9 seconds of bullet flight. 1,247 meters of travel. The round threaded through a 10-centimeter gap in the barrier, traveling at 2,750 feet per second. Impact. Through the scope, she saw Sokolov's body jerk, saw him collapse backward, saw the threat eliminated in the single most difficult shot she'd ever attempted. Cole stared through his spotting scope, not breathing. Hit confirmed. He's down. Ma'am, you just... That was... Next target. But there were no next targets. The enemy force broke immediately. Without Sokolov's leadership, without their tactical coordinator, the mercenary company lost all cohesion. Survivors were surrendering or fleeing into the jungle. The assault collapsed completely. The base defense had held, barely, bloodied, but alive. Calloway lowered her rifle, let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of 8 years. 8 years of corruption, 8 years of Americans dying, 8 years of one man selling his oath for offshore payments. Cole was still staring at the distant ridge where Sokolov had fallen. Ma'am, I've trained my entire life. I've studied with the best instructors. I've never seen anything like what you just did. You'll get there. You already have the important part. What's that? You stayed when you could have run. You trusted your training when everything was chaos. That's not something I can teach. You already know it. Military police were leading Vance out in handcuffs. Federal agents had arrived by helicopter during the battle drawn by the evidence Garrett had distributed. The conspiracy was unraveling in real-time arrests, spreading beyond the base to senators and generals and intelligence officers who'd thought themselves untouchable. Specialist Emma Garrett stood near the intelligence bunker, watching the arrests unfold. Calloway found her there, standing alone. "You did the right thing," Calloway said quietly. Garrett nodded. 23 Americans. I couldn't let it be 24, 25. She looked at Calloway. "What happens to me now?" "Federal witness protection, probably. New identity, new life." Calloway paused. "It's not easy, but it's right. Like being a ghost." "Something like that." Garrett managed a small smile. "Then I guess you'll teach me how to disappear." "Already have," Calloway said, and she was gone, fading into the crowd before Garrett could respond. 23 Americans over 8 years, but no more. Not ever again. Thornton found Calloway as she was breaking down her rifle. His leg was properly bandaged now, but he still limped. Would probably limp for the rest of his life. Small price for surviving what should have killed him. "We're deploying back to main base tomorrow. Before we go, I wanted to say..." He paused, looking for words. "You gave us our lives back. There's no way to repay that. You don't need to repay it. You just need to stay alive." He handed her a second challenge coin, different from the first. This one was personal, his name engraved on one side. On the other, a simple inscription, "Brotherhood earned 2025. First coin was for the Valley. This one is for everything after. You're part of this team forever, no matter where you go or what you do." The other SEALs were gathering now. 12 men forming a loose circle around her, wounded but standing, alive because someone had been willing to break every rule that mattered. Thornton stepped back, gave a nod. Together, the entire team spoke one word. "Hooyah." Not loud, not for show, just solid, respectful. The sound of brotherhood acknowledging one of their own. Calloway stood at attention, nodded once. The kind of acknowledgement that came from someone who didn't give those easily, who understood the weight of what they were offering. Then she turned and walked away. Back toward the shadows where she worked best, back toward being invisible. Cole ran to catch up. "Ma'am, where will you go?" "Wherever I'm needed." Can I learn from you? Stay in contact." "You already learned the most important lesson. You backed your team when others wouldn't. That's not something I can teach. You already have it." She disappeared into the darkness between buildings, fading from view like she'd never been there. But the challenge coin in her pocket felt warm. 2 challenge coins now. Project Wraith and SEAL Team. Recognition from communities that didn't give recognition lightly. Maybe she wasn't a ghost anymore. Maybe she was something else. Something that only appeared when the call came. When lives hung in the balance. When no one else could help. 6 months later, different jungle, different country, American medical team trapped by cartel forces in Central America. 8 doctors and nurses pinned in a remote clinic. No military assets available. Political complications. State Department desperate. A panicked voice on encrypted emergency frequency. "Is there anyone any asset at all? They're going to execute us at dawn." Static. No response from official channels. The doctors were on their own. Abandoned. Forgotten. Then a voice. Calm, steady, quiet. Someone who doesn't miss. Who is this?" "Doesn't matter. Keep your heads down for the next 30 minutes. Help is here." 900 meters from the cartel compound, Calloway settled into a perfect hide site. Different country, different rifle, same mission. The scope settled on the first target. Cartel enforcer with radio coordinating the execution. Her whisper carried through the jungle darkness. "For those who can't call for help." Breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. Finger on trigger. The rifle spoke. And 8 Americans would live to see another sunrise. Because somewhere in the world, a ghost was always watching. Always ready. Always precise. And she never missed.